We're going to start today Perek Tazayin. And Perek Tazayin is going to give us two big rules. In Hebrew, Klal Gadol. Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us to two Klal Gadol, two cardinal fundamental ideas. And the essence of what Chassidus Chabad is, I believe, is in the first 9 lines of this chapter. So for those of you who have been coming for the last, when did we start? A year ago almost? When did we start? After Tishrei?
Almost a year.
So we finally arrived at, and we're going to get to, after all our, the prakim that we learned, what is Chassidus Chabad? Let's back up a little. In the end of Perek Yud Daled, in the end of chapter 14, as we mentioned, the Alter Rebbe transitions. The Alter Rebbe is talking about us, people who struggle in life. I'm not talking about financial struggles, although that too, because the tzaddik doesn't have financial struggles. Why doesn't the tzaddik have financial struggles? Not because he's wealthy, but because
He could do with less. Care about money.
Right.
He could do with less.
Yeah.
Has emunah now?
Yeah, he has a munah that everything is for the good, and it's not important to him.
And it's not American.
So we all have to deal with our, we deal with our struggles, but most importantly, our struggles in Avodas Hashem and serving Hashem. And the first thing the Alter Rebbe lays out is a path, how to be able to overcome our struggles and serve Hashem despite the temptations. And the focus over there very much is on Al Tehi Rasha, don't be a Rasha. A Rasha, as the Alter Rebbe explains, is someone who does an Aveira, someone who succumbs to temptation, even once. So the focus over there is do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing. How can a person ensure that they're always doing what Hashem wants them to be doing and not doing that which Hashem doesn't want them to be doing? That is until the middle of chapter 14. And then the Alter Rebbe changes focus to Tehit Tzaddik. It's not enough not to be a Rasha, you have to try to be a Tzaddik. Probably you'll never get there. That doesn't change the fact that you have to strive to be a tzaddik. What does a tzaddik mean? A tzaddik means not only someone who does the right thing, but also who has impacted his insides, his spiritual insides, his thought patterns, his way of thinking, his emotions, his feelings, his desires. That is the tzaddik. So the Rebbe turns to us and tells us, I know you're struggling, and you might think, who cares about my feelings? Who cares about whether I love Hashem, I don't love Hashem, whether I'm enthusiastic about studying Torah or not enthusiastic about studying Torah, whether I love my fellow Jew or not, as long as I'm doing the right thing. Isn't that the main thing? Hamaisu ha'ikar. The main thing is stay away from an Aveira and make sure to do the mitzvah. Says Alter Rebbe, no, that's not enough. Tehit Tzaddik, before the neshama comes down here to this world, it is administered an oath, and it is said, it's not enough that Al Tehi Rasha, it's not enough that you're not a Rasha, but you have to actively try to be a Tzaddik. Meaning, and that's where we're introduced to the concept of Avodas Hashem. And in Chassidic terminology, when we talk about Avodas Hashem is not about what I do, but changing who I am. And that segued into chapter 15, which is all about the two types of Beinini, the Oved Hashem and Lo Yavadai, meaning that you could be someone who's a Beinini who does the right thing at all times, but is not a Oved Hashem, doesn't serve Hashem, is not working on the Tehit Tzaddik. How do I go about doing this Tehit Tzaddik? How do I go about serving Hashem and changing myself? This is where Chabad comes in. What is Chabad? Chabad is Chachma Bina Adas. The foundation is mindfulness and meditation. focus and concentration and contemplation. The mind plays a major role over here. And not because Chabad are a bunch of cerebral people. It's not that's what Chabad wants us to be. Chabad, so you guys are the Einsteins. You the guys are sitting in the colleges and thinking all day. That's not the point at all. The point is because, as we've discussed many times before, the human psyche is a machine. And the machine begins with the mind, and then it moves on to the heart, and then it moves on to thought, speech, and action. The mind impacts the heart, the mind influences the heart, and the heart influences our behavior. So therefore, in order to be able to make this, to be able to change my heart, to be able to change my feelings, I have to start with my mind. It's about the way I think. If I spend time thinking about the greatness of Hashem, and that is really what the study of Chassidus is all about. Yeah, it's philosophy. I'm sitting and I'm learning, and it's beautiful learning all about Hashem. The point is to sit and actually take time to think about it, and that automatically influences the heart, that the heart should love Hashem, the heart should fear Hashem, and then the emotions, and then the behaviors follow. That is what Chabad is all about. That was the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. That was, if you say, you want to put in a few words, what did the Alter Rebbe want to accomplish? He wanted to accomplish this mind, heart, behavior process, and that applies to everyone. It's not only to tzaddikim. Even those people who are struggling, they also have to have this mind, heart, behavior process. And not only this way, not only are they doing the right thing, but also their feelings also become changed. And let's do inside Perek Tazayin. V'zeh klal gadol b'avedas Hashem lebeinanim. This is a cardinal rule in Avedis Hashem for the people who struggle. Ha'ikaru, the main thing is limshoil v'lishleit ala tava shebechalal hasmali. The main thing is to control and dominate the nature which is in the left side of the heart. Not only to control behavior, but actually to be able to influence the way the heart feels. And how is that possible? Al Yidei Eir Hashem, through the divine light, Hameir l'nefesh elokish shebemayach, as discussed in chapter 12, which is illuminates for the nefesh elokish, which is in the mind, to use that, v'lishlet ala leiv, to use the natural dominion which Hashem gives the mind to control the heart and to dominate the heart. When a person thinks in his mind, B'gdula Sein Seif Baruch Hu, in the greatness of Hashem, and thereby to be able to give give birth from his bina, from his understanding, ruach das v'yiras Hashem b'moichay, to come about to das, and then a fear of Hashem in the mind, li sur mira, the fear of Hashem causes him to steer clear of anything which is evil, de'iraiso d'Rabbanan, whether it's something which is forbidden from the Torah, whether it's something which is forbidden midrabbanan. Va'afilu isur kal shel devreim chas v'shalom, even a seemingly relatively trivial isur midrabbanan, va'avas Hashem beliboy, and also through a person's esbaidinus, to a person's meditation, to give birth to a love for Hashem in the heart, b'chol ha'imani, in the right side of the heart, b'chasheka v'chafetza, with desire and with a yearning l'davka by, to connect to Hashem, b'kiyim ha'mitzvahs, through doing mitzvahs, de'iraisa or de'rabanan, whether de'iraisa or de'rabanan, v'talmud Torah shekeneged kulan, and studying Torah, which is the equivalent of them all. There you go. That's Chabad. Yes.
It seems that Yira is in the brain and Abba is in the waist.
In several places in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe talks Yiras Hashem. There's Yira and Pachad. The Yira is in the mind, and the Pachad is in the heart. Why over here does he only talk about the Yira in the mind, not the Pachad in the heart? I don't know. That's a good question. So we know what Chabad is, but we've led up to this point, and this tells us what it's about. But the question is, why? Why is it important? We know what, but we still need to figure out the why. And today, I want to talk about a few different angles of why this is so important. But first, just a general, what does this mean? This means that we take time in the beginning of the day, preferably before davening, to think about Hashem. To think about Hashem and about Hashem's greatness, Hashem's kindness, Hashem's desire for a relationship with us. We open up a Chassidic text and we study a sefer, whether it's time depending, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. On Shabbos we try to spend a little more time doing that. And the main thing is that it's not only about, wrestling with the information and trying to understand it, but internalizing, taking time to think about it, so that our heart is moved. And that's generally in the morning. Before we do a mitzvah, we pause. Every time before we do a mitzvah, we use our Chabad. We think about the who Hashem is, and the privilege, the incredible zchus that we have, that we're able to connect to Hashem through doing this mitzvah. That is the basic idea of Chabad, that it's not enough for me to do, I have to get my heart involved also. And it's important on many different levels. Level number one. On the first level, if I can't get myself emotionally invested, ultimately, the struggle is too difficult. In the addiction world, or let me rephrase that, in the recovery world, there's a term called white knuckling, which means it's like when you hold on to something very, very, hold on fast and very strongly till your knuckles turn white. So we're talking about a person who's addicted to whatever substance it may be, the drug of choice, and the person resolves they're not going to do it ever again. And every time the urge, the temptation comes up, they're going to just white knuckle it. They're not going to do it. And everyone knows the question is it going to last for 2 hours, a day, a week, a month, 5 months? That's already on the, that's an optimistic outlook. It doesn't last. There's a limit to how long you can white knuckle something. There's a limit to how long you can just go by sheer willpower alone. And the understanding is that for recovery to be able to be sustainable, something needs to happen inside. There needs to be a change on the inside, which automatically eases the process on the outside also. And we all know in life, we're all addicted. We're all addicts. That's the truth. If you think into what an addict is, what is an addict? Is someone who loses control over a certain area. His mind says, "Don't do this." And he understands he shouldn't do this, but he does it anyways. And so, in a small sense, it applies to us also. We're all those areas in our life which are unmanageable and uncontrollable. And white knuckling is nice, but it doesn't work for extended periods of time. Doesn't work. New Year's resolutions, there are the statistics out there on it, and I don't know the exact statistics, but how many of them last? Why don't they last? Because the theory of a New Year's resolution is that I'm the same person who I was last year, but my behavior is going to be different. But why should my behavior be different if I'm the same? Simple question. And that's why the odds of them actually being carried through for an extended period of time is very low. So what's the Eitzah? So what do we do about that? The answer is, if you want your New Year's resolution to last or anything of that sort, you can't be the same person. You have to become a different person. What does that mean to become a different person? That you should feel differently. The reason why yesterday I did that thing, even though I understood that I shouldn't be doing it, is because I had one feeling in my heart. Today, I'm going to have a different feeling. Today, my heart is going to be filled with love for Hashem instead of whatever other shtusim it was filled with yesterday. So, reason number one why it's so important to have the heart invested in it, and again, the only way to get your heart invested in it is starting with Chabad. You can't change your heart without your mind. I don't know if we mentioned this in the past, the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy. We ever spoke about this?
No.
CBT. It's almost like Chabad. Think about it. Just change the T into a D and you have Chabad. What is cognitive behavioral therapy? How do you're a therapist?
No, I know about it.
Okay. Most people here have been to therapists. It's fine, whether we'll admit it or not.
2 Yidden, Albert Ellis and Aaron T. Beck.
Okay.
2 Yidden.
Who came up with the theory?
Yes.
No, it's not true. The Alter Rebbe came up with the theory.
Oh, yeah. Well, they came up with it now.
Yeah. The theory, cognitive behavioral theory means is that everything that all the problem, many of the disorders that we have are rooted in our way of thinking about things. Our disorders come from the way we feel about things. The way we feel about things come from the way we think about things. So, if I have an anxiety, for example, that's obviously a feeling. But even if I have, let's say, an eating disorder, that's also because of the way I feel about food. And all my feelings that I have come from the way that I think about things. If I can change my thought patterns, the way I think about things, I'll change my feelings and the disorders will go away. It's a reprogramming of the mind. Reprogramming, getting used to think in a different way. That's exactly what Chabad is. If I get used to thinking in a certain way, on a regular basis, thinking about Hashem, which means thinking about Hashem in a certain way, and thinking about the world in a certain way, and thinking about my fellow Yid in a certain way, thinking about Torah and mitzvahs in a certain way, that impacts my emotions, and then the disorders go away. So is it theoretically possible for me to white knuckle? Actually, interestingly, based on what we learned in Tanya, probably the answer is yes. I know this contradicts a little what I said earlier. But the premise of moyach shalt al alev means that the mind can control, dominate over the heart. In other words, when we say moyach shalt al alev, that's an important thing to add in over here. When we say that moyach shalt al alev, there are two meanings to moyach shalt al alev. The mind rules the heart. One way of understanding it is that if my mind says A and my heart says B, the mind has the capacity to overrule the heart, and I'll act in accordance with what my mind says. So if my heart says I want this chocolate, my mind says you're a diabetic and it's going to kill you. So I didn't change what my heart wants, but my mind is going to prevail. Yes. Another understanding of Meir Shat Alev means that the mind dominates the heart, and the mind has the ability to actually control the way the heart feels, at least to a certain extent. So Moyach Shat Alev is very real, and therefore theoretically, if I could go 1 day without doing an Avera, just by white knuckling, theoretically I could do 10 years also. But it's very difficult. In other words, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to just abstain from doing what's right. Theoretically, again, if something's possible to do for 1 day, then theoretically it has to be possible to do it for 10 years also. Because 10 years is only 1 day times 3,650, right? But it's very difficult. The reason why you have to get your heart invested is because, practically speaking, if you want that your service of Hashem should be sustained, and if you want sustained and sustainable, and if you want to overcome your struggle not only for 1 day, or 2 days, or 10 days, but if you want it to be something which is an ongoing thing, the way to do it is by getting the heart in also, and developing feelings for what you're doing. So that's number one. It's just a very practical reason why Chabad is so important. Reason number two. Let's say, for argument's sake, I'm a very, very strong-willed person. I could get away with white knuckling. I could do it. I have ironclad willpower. I'm going to decide I'm doing every mitzvah. I'm not going to do any averis, and I'm going to do it. I think I know a person or two who can get away with that. In other words, people who are just like, crazy self-control. Anyone here know a person of that sort? Disciplined and, they probably were a drill sergeant in the previous incarnation.
Very regimental, right?
Yeah. Sorry?
An idea.
Yeah. My grandfather, Olav Shalom, my father's father, he was a soldier in the American Army in World War II in Okinawa. And he also worked in the Navy afterwards. And he was that kind of person. And he was a soldier also in Hashem's army. It's a really special person. And he was up every morning at 5:30 in the morning and davening and with his shir, and very, very simple person. He was a very simple person. It wasn't the big Talmud Chacham, but a real soldier of Hashem. Certain people, it's the right thing, and there's nothing. But then there's the rest of us. Okay, there's the rest of us.
You know what you remind me of? I was in the Israeli army, and I get up early to daven, and all the soldiers, they're not religious, was respecting me. How you get up hour before, instead go to sleep, your whole night you were training and doing, and you get up, they were respecting so highly that I had nachatu from that, and I was mekarev a lot of them because of that.
Right, very, very impressive. So I don't know if that's because you had feelings for it or because you're a disciplined person, one way or another. But let's say that a person Taka is a soldier. He can get away with it. He doesn't need his heart to be invested. He doesn't need the love and the fear and the enthusiasm and the passion and the excitement. But what's the difference between a person who does a mitzvah with emotional investment? Let me rephrase that. What is the difference between a mitzvah which is done with emotional investment and a mitzvah which is done because I'm a soldier and I have to do it? What's the difference?
Lacks emotion.
Lacks emotion.
Yeah, there's no emotion to it. It's dry.
Is it going to be is it going to be the exact same mitzvah?
No,
it's not.
No.
What's going to be the difference?
He's not connecting to Hashem.
That's that's a spiritual component which we're going to get into later. What I'm saying is, even besides the fact that it's dry, will it be the exact same mitzvah?
No.
How's it going to be different?
Next
passion.
But that also impacts the way that the mitzvah is done. Chazal tell us, Ezahu Chassid. Who's a Chassid? No, that's Ezahu Asher. Actually, it's not Ezahu Chassid. We know in general, when we talk about a Chassid is someone who goes Lifnim Mishur Sadin, beyond the letter of the law. What makes someone go Lifnim Mishur Sadin? What motivates someone? I don't have to. I'm not obligated to do so. Why am I doing it?
Because he has love. Please Hashem. Love.
It's the emotional investment. So we see how it's coming together. The chassid is the one who it's not only about behavior.
It's the emotions also.
In our own relationships, as we all know, and sometimes we do what we have to do. And what we have to do in a relationship can be quite extensive. And sometimes you go above and beyond. What causes you to go above and beyond? When there's a certain special feeling involved. Without that special feeling, you're not going to go above and beyond. So the second reason why Chabad is important is even if the first reason was a technical reason, a practical reason. The struggle becomes too difficult without the emotional investment. The second reason is, forget about that for a moment. Even let's say that you're convinced that you could prevail in your struggle. But the emotional investment is what gives the whole chayas, the whole energy and life and vitality of a mitzvah. It becomes a different mitzvah. So first of all, the mitzvah that you do is alive. And also, you go to much greater extents to do a mitzvah. Because it's not just something I have to do, it's something that becomes my passion. And if we're in a relationship with Hashem, we can all understand the difference. Just like, Shlomo HaMelech, used human relationships, and specifically between husband and wife, to illustrate the relationship between us and Hashem. So we can take the liberty of doing that also at times. If we're in a relationship with Hashem, so think about it. What is the difference between me serving Hashem because I have to? Oh, it says in the Torah, let me okay, I have to do it, as opposed to having that deep emotional investment in it. There was a chassid whose name was Reb Shmuel Bitzalel. He's known in Chabad lore as the Rashbatz, after his Rosh Tevis. And he was an older chassid when the Frierdiker Rebbe and the previous Rebbe was a young child. So we're talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe was born in 1880, at which point he was an older chassid already. He was a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek passed away in 1866. So we're talking about the mid 19th century. How did he become a chassid? So he didn't start off life as a chassid. He started off as that which was known at that point in time as a misnagid. And one year was Parsha Zachar. I don't remember the story with all the details, but he stumbled into Lubavitch Shul. Hope I'm getting the details of the story correct, but the punchline remains the same. And there was a chassid there of the Alter Rebbe whose name was Reb Zalman Zesmer, chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he laned Parsha Zachar. And the Rashbatz, he went over to him, and afterwards he says, "I've never seen someone with such hatred for Amalek. Where did you get that from?" He says, "You want to know? Go to Lubavitch." He went off to Lubavitch, and the rest is history. Wow. Being a chassid is not just about a behavior. I know that's in a negative, in the negative kav. In other words, but obviously there's also the love for Hashem, which is, we looked earlier in Tanya that hatred for something is the direct opposite of love. When you love something, then you absolutely despise anything which is contrary, right? Which is the enemy of my beloved is my enemy also. So his love for his hate for Amalek was a direct consequence, a direct result of his love for Hashem. And there are many stories of Chassidim, the passion they had in doing a mitzvah, and that's really what Chassidus is all about. It's about life. And where does this life come from? It's not about that. It's not about the Al Tehi Rasha. Of course, Al Tehi Rasha. Of course, you can't be a Rasha. But being a Chassid is much more than Al Tehi Rasha. Being a Chassid is about being Tehi Tzaddik, about working also on influencing oneself. That's point number 2.
It's everything is ishtadlut. When you try not to be Rasha, to be a Chassid, a Tzaddik, you have to make the utmost of your ability.
Takes work. Takes work. I think we might have mentioned this in the past. In this world, if you want to accomplish something, we know it takes time, effort, and money. I want to be a doctor. Okay, how can I be a doctor today? You can't be a doctor today. It doesn't work that way. But for some reason in our spiritual life, we expect to be able to go like this, and everything, how do I flip the switch? And how do I start loving Hashem? There's this double standard that we expect, that when it comes to a physical attainment, we understand that involves a great investment of time and effort and money. But in spiritual things, we're not as serious about that. But in terms of Avodas Hashem, it's just as serious. And yes, it's a process, and Chabad doesn't happen overnight. In other words, yes, me thinking tomorrow about the greatness of Hashem will impact me tomorrow. But to get to where I really want to have a passion and a chayis, it's a lifestyle change. So it's a certain, today, the 21st century, actually mindfulness is a very big word. So it's a buzzword, mindfulness. Where I work. So buzzwords are very important because, for marketing purposes, we make shiurim, so you have to market. So how do you market a shiur on Torah? So you have to dress it up in buzzwords. So you tell people that we're going to teach you how to be mindful, and everyone comes. We're teaching them the same Torah, but it's about you have to know the buzzwords in order to be able to attract people to come. So mindfulness is a buzzword. And what is mindfulness? This is mindfulness. Mindfulness, it's not enough that I'm doing a mitzvah. I have to be mindful of what I'm doing. I have to stop before I'm doing and reflect. And that changes the entire context and the entire substance of the mitzvah that I'm doing subsequently. So, reason number one, practical. It's very difficult to be able to long-term be successful in the battle unless you can really work on yourself and change yourself. Reason number two, the quality of the service of Hashem is completely different. Reason number three is the other side of the coin of reason number two. But instead of focusing on the mitzvah, let's focus on the person. Is my purpose and goal here in this world to remain the same person who I am, the same unholy person who I am, with unholy thoughts and temptations and feelings and aspirations? However, all of that is under control and I do the right thing? Does that sound right to you?
I don't follow.
Most
Can you
people
repeat that
like
again?
that. A lot of people like
I
that.
didn't follow.
If I don't get my heart invested, so that means that I am born with an Nefesh Bahamis, which means that naturally I desire certain things and I love certain things, and naturally I'm drawn to materialism. And there's a song. There's a Chassidic song. I don't know if you ever heard it. I don't know if you ever spoke about it. Essen Essig.
Go ahead.
Essen Essig, schlafen schlaft sich, was soll man tun, als Davin sagt nicht. Which means most people don't know the proper translation for this. It means when it comes to eating, esach means
It goes good. Easy.
it's easy. When I have some food in front of me, when I'm hungry, I don't have to sit down and think, okay, so right now I'm hungry, which means that my body requires some carbohydrates and some proteins, and also let me mix in a little with other food groups, because what good and okay, and I have to eat because to keep my body going, right? When it comes to drinking, when it comes to sleeping, all these things, what do you mean? Aber daven sich nicht. When it comes to davening, not that I don't daven, we daven, that's not the point. The point is not, it doesn't say ich daven nicht. Ich daven nicht means I don't daven. That's not the song. Se daven sich nicht in Yiddish, it's hard to find the exact translation, is it's not natural.
They have the same emotion.
It's not natural.
So try.
This I have to make myself do. I don't have to make myself eat. I don't have to make myself sleep. And I have to make, and that's the song is. It's a question. The whole song. Essen, schlafen, what should we do? Like, what's this all about? Why? My neshama needs davening. My neshama just as much as my body needs to eat. So why is this difficult? And this is something which is so.
Isn't it Russian Nifal? Essach. Not Essich. Essach.
Right.
It eats by itself. So
Right.
it's not even it's a Nifal.
It happens, right?
It happens.
Yeah. That's how natural it is. In other words, the chassid isn't happy with the status quo of I daven. No. It's not enough that I daven. It bothers me as daven sich nicht. Why? Because as daven sich nicht, that means that I'm still not a holy person. I'm doing holy things, but am I holy? Is the tachlis hakavana in this world that I should come? Is the whole point of sending the neshama down over here that I should do holy things, but I should remain the same crass individual who's constantly controlling my impulses and not acting upon them? Or is the kavana when Hashem sent me down here. In other words, to minimize that disconnect. Now, ultimately, the only one who eliminates that disconnect is the tzaddik. In other words, between action, between mitzvahs and who I am. By the tzaddik, everything is holistic. There's no two sides. Everything is just a desire for mitzvahs and Hashem and Torah and everything. Now, we might not ever get there, but we could lessen the gap between ourselves and what we do. I'm learning Torah, I'm doing mitzvahs. Can I lessen the gap? Can I start having some feelings for what I'm doing? Can I become a holier person? Not only do holy things, but I need to be a holy person. And let's go back to what we were saying before. We're in a relationship with Hashem. What is a relationship? Can you imagine? Hassan goes to his wife and to his Kala and says to her, okay, here's a story. I want to get married to you. Here are the terms of marriage. This is what you're going to do for me. You're going to make for me every single day supper, and you're going to clean my house, and you're going to do the laundry. You're going to take care of the kids. I'm also going to work a little, get ready Shabbos, and in exchange, I'm going to work, and I'm going to provide you money, and I'm going to whatever. I know I'm giving a little sexist version of the marriage, maybe old-fashioned, but the point remains, and my obligations to you is to house you and to shelter you and to clothe you. That's a marriage.
It sounds like a business.
It's a business deal. Are we in a business deal with Hashem? Or are we in a marriage with Hashem?
Marriage.
We're in a marriage with Hashem. We're in a marriage. It's not just about what I do. There's something much deeper over here. There's a deeper dynamic over here. So, the third argument that we're making over here is that ultimately it's all about a relationship. It's about us connecting to Hashem. And although we have to be very clear, going back to what we learned in Tanya, in the first parak in Tanya, our relationship, our love and our fear of Hashem is meaningless if they're not in the context of Torah mitzvahs. In other words, me loving Hashem and me fearing Hashem, if I'm not doing Torah mitzvahs, that means nothing. That's not a relationship at all. However, if you remember, we spoke about this at length earlier on in Tanya and Perik Dalet. When the relationship is created through the mitzvahs that I do, that's how I connect to Hashem, through the Torah that I learn. And when I also invest in that, my emotions and my intellect, then the entirety of me is connected to Hashem. Entirety of who I am. So again, this means mindfulness, this means investing our minds and our hearts in our service of Hashem, and that is the essence of what Chabad is. It's not enough al Tihi Rasha, there also has to be the Tihi Tzaddik. And then there's, last but not least, number 4, which is very similar to what we spoke about the number 2, but it gives it a Kabbalistic spin. And I think that's what you were referring to earlier. In Kabbalah, it talks about how Ava and Yira, the fear and love that I have for a mitzvah, they are the 2 wings. Ava is the right, every mitzvah needs wings. Ava is the right wing, and Yira is the left wing. And when a mitzvah has Ava and Yira, then it flies up to Hashem. It says in Kabbalah. And depending on the level of Ava and Yira, depends on how high it flies. We're going to learn about that much more in Perik Lametes and Perik Mem, chapters 39 and 40. We're not going to go into length, but what does that mean? And a very simple, I know that sounds very something you could tell to your child or to your grandchild. You do a mitzvah if you love Hashem. They're busy envisioning the mitzvah with the wings flying up. And obviously this is anthropomorphic, not to be taken a little, but what does that mean? Everything in this world has a guf and a neshama, a body and a soul. Human beings have a body and a soul. But actions also have. Every action has a guf and has a neshama. Every single action. And the neshama of something is the intent and the feeling behind it. Interestingly, we're not going to go into this at length now. The ability to be able to do tshuva when a person does an avera, going back a little to what we learned about earlier on in chapter 7, you can't change the body of what you have done, but you can always change the neshama. That's really what tshuva is, going back and changing the neshama of the deed you've done, but we're not going to, for another time. What is the neshama of an act? Very simply, as we mentioned earlier, an act that is done with passion is a live act. It has a neshama, it's alive. An act that is done without passion is devoid of the neshama. Okay, if it's done with passion, then you can have a different type of neshama depending on the type of passion that was invested in it. Without a neshama, so a mitzvah done is a mitzvah done. You have done what Hashem wants, but the mitzvah can't relate and fly up and ascend to the spiritual worlds because it's missing its spiritual dimension. For the mitzvah to go on, to be able to be elevated to the higher worlds, it needs to have that neshama also. So that's a Kabbalistic reason for why you have to have Ava V'yira and you have to have feelings, because in order for the mitzvah to be able to be an animated mitzvah, it needs to be able to fly up. And here we need to add one point over here before we move on in Tanya. The neshama of a mitzvah is the feelings behind it, not the thoughts behind it. Seichel cannot be the neshama for an act or for a mitzvah. Only midos, only emotions, not intellect. And why is that?
But you need to see seichel in order to get the emotion.
Correct.
Without the seichel, there is no emotion.
Without the seichel, there is no emotion. Correct. But the seichel alone cannot be a neshama. Only emotions are a neshama. Sorry, what was your question?
The neshama of a mitzvah is what?
Can only be midos, emotions, not seichel, not intellect. And why is that? So this is just a little understanding of the way seichel and midos work.
So you say the neshama of a mitzvah is the intellect?
Is not the intellect. Not the intellect. Right. And the reason why is because intellect never leads to action directly. The only way that intellect can lead to action is with emotions. Meaning, if I know I should do something, I'll never do it. If I know I shouldn't do something, it's also not going to impact me. What gets us moving in life? Always emotions, feelings. Positive feelings or negative feelings. Positive feelings meaning knowing I'm doing it because I want to do it because of some desirable outcome or result that's going to happen from my action. Or I'm going to do something because of a negative reason, meaning I'm fearful of an undesirable thing that will happen if I don't do it. Or vice versa, in other words, staying away from something. What gets you to wake up in the morning and go to your job? The fact that you understand that the right thing is to go and do your job?
No, fear. Money.
Fear on one side, your fear of being poor on one side, and your love of money on the other side. And it's not, and okay, love of money sounds very crass, sounds very bad.
Love of the pleasure that money will bring you.
Right, love of all those things that of the feeling of contentment and happiness, that all those things that your job and your money bring you, exactly. And the same thing is in everything. The fact that my mind tells me something, my heart has to be talked to. In Zohar says, Liba pali l'chol shaifen, which means that the heart shoots off blood in all directions. And just like physically, the entire body receives its blood from the heart, and the blood is the warmth and the chayis of it. So also, when you have a feeling, feelings automatically influence the limbs to move and influence people to do things. And therefore, the feeling of something, the feeling for something becomes the neshama for that thing. Every single thing. What is the neshama? What is the inner spiritual component of it? Is the feelings that are behind it. Because there is too big of a disconnect between intellect and action for the intellect to actually invest itself within the action and to impel it to move. Therefore, the intellect influences the heart, and the heart is what the feelings actually invest themselves within the actions. And that's why also, like we said, the action, the type of action, you could look at a person and know the way he's behaving, and you could probably get a feeling for the type of feelings that he's having for it. Because that's the neshama. So sometimes you could look at a person and who's at his job, and what you look at the way he's performing, and you figure out what the neshama is. Is the neshama that he's enjoying his job, or is the neshama that he's fearful of losing his job? The way he's doing his job probably can tell you that also. So over here we have the first klal gadol, the first fundamental rule for beinanim, for strugglers, for us, is that it's not enough to do the right thing, but we have to work on ourselves and being mindful and meditating in the greatness of Hashem. And by the way, meditation is also a buzzword today. Meditation is also.
Are we going to talk about
It's kind of funny because, Lubavitchers who are teaching this to other people, they're like, meditation is a scary word. And they don't realize the people who are teaching it to, they're not scared of it. You're scared of it, but not the people who, yeah. What were you saying?
Will we be learning about meditating
Technique?
techniques?
No.
No, we're not.
I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. For whatever reason, Chassidus Chabad talks a lot about meditation and does not talk about technique.
So the Breslov is the opposite? They do it more, they do it more.
Well,
Breslov does more.
What's
Breslov talks
Breslov?
about it quite a bit.
the technique? What does he talk in terms of technique?
Who are you talking about?
Going out into nature. They talk about
Yes,
going
sir.
out into nature, be
Yeah, the whole
surrounded.
thing.
That part I'm aware of, going out into nature. I'll tell you what.
You talk to
The,
God privately in your own words.
Use
right,
your
that's
words.
hisboidedus, not hisboidinus. That's a different hisboidedus. It's a different nuance.
But that's a form of meditation.
Most meditation today, I don't know if most, but a large part of the Far Eastern transcendental meditation, and I'm not an expert in this in any way, but I believe, is not about meditating on something, but rather about emptying the mind and relaxation. And to do that, you need technique, because it's not natural to empty the mind. So if I'm going to focus on that drop of water on the ceiling over there, or on the leaf, didn't have to look. It was the point isn't that leaf or the drop of water is important. The point is, by focusing on that, I'm emptying my mind and then relaxing. One second, let me finish. Chassidus Chabad is not about emptying the mind at all. It means focusing on something very deeply. So I don't know how much technique you need over there. It's more about willpower than technique. It's more about determination, because especially if you can argue that it was never more difficult than today's day and age to do this. Because in today's day and age, when everything has to be in 20 seconds or less, and if you want to post on Twitter, it has to be 160 characters or less. And we're used to what's called new sound bites. Everything is about a sound bite. The notion of sitting and focusing on a concept in your mind for 3 minutes sounds like it's a lifetime, and it sounds so difficult. But it's not an issue of technique. It's an issue of determination and willpower. I'm going to sit and focus now. I'm not going to get distracted by my cell phone and by other thoughts. And for whatever reason, technique isn't discussed, and I believe this is the reason why. It's not really about technique. It's about the desire and determination to actually do it, to take the time to be mindful. You do a mitzvah, take a minute to think about the mitzvah and about Hashem who gave the mitzvah and how special that is. Do you need a technique for that? Or do you need just, as they would say in Yiddish, in good old Yiddish, do you need the zisfleis for that? That's
It said that Hasidim Rishonim, Tzadikim Rishonim, used to, before the daven, hour before they were preparing the set. What's that in our?
That's basically what he's trying to say. Well, but who has the time? Father Bachman has to run
it's a halacha and shulchan aruch. Before we daven, you're talking about Siddur Rishonim. Before davening, we have to think about Reimumus Hakel, V'shiflos Ha'adam. It's halacha in shulchan aruch. Before davening, not during davening. And you see people walking into shul. You have to sit down and think about the greatness of Hashem and Shiflos Ha'adam, the lowliness of a person, and the juxtaposition of the two, and how lucky you are to be able to daven to Hashem, and then you can start davening. It's halach. And ein bim l'spal l'alamatech koy v'dreish, right? It's so that's the first klal. What's the second klal? The second cardinal rule which we're going to get in Perek Tazayin. What if I can't? I can't. Thought about the greatness of Hashem before I davened. Didn't work. Can anyone here envision that happening to themselves?
all the time.
All the time. A lot to do a mitzvah. I'm not excited. So you're telling me that if I sit for 20 years, I think every day about Hashem I'll get excited? Maybe. But right now it's not working. It's not working. What do I do? So does that mean that my mitzvahs right now are missing on neshama? And the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us, by the way, it's possible that in 20 years from now you'll be feeling the same way. It's possible. Depending on the level of your neshama, it's possible. Certain people that is actually lack the capacity due to the level of the neshama to have that feeling of the expansive, beautiful feeling of excitement and love for Hashem. So am I a lost case? I think we all know the answer to that question, right? The question is why? What is the point of all this? Okay, I'm going to stop here. I know it's a little early, but this is the next klal, which is a very large thing. And next week I'm not going to be here, so it doesn't make sense to start for 5 minutes now and then continue. So this is we're going to enter. In other words, just where we're going to continue next class. We learned about the importance of having this emotional investment. What if I fail to be able to accomplish that? That's what we're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks and next class. And until that point, you should just know that if you can't develop that emotional investment, you'll also be fine. You also serve the Eibishter. Don't give up, and we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem in 2 weeks.